Stunt work, you're going to get dinged and bruised and knocked around. And explosions, just a concussion of them, can be deadly. And these guys, they can place a bomb and an explosion and a squib and just absolute perfection. I mean, I didn't have a guy, anybody, get any kind of a mark on them. The hairiest thing was shooting in a maximum security prison. I mean, the rest of it was a cake. I mean, we were in there with it was the real deal. I took the stunt team to the real penitentiary and shot him running across the roof, and all that stuff up there is with the double on the actual roof because they wouldn't let anybody else up there. And then we did all the actual helicopter. That's all real stuff. That's a real guy hanging, flying over the real barbed wire and all that. It was radical. I mean, we had this guy flying and missing the fences by 4 and 5 feet. We hung Mark Hicks on the chopper. We had a safety line on him, but he had to muscle up and climb up into this thing in a full banking turn. It was just amazing. That's the kind of thing sometimes you got to just start shooting because, you know, if you start rehearsing with a guy hanging too long, it's just the odds and the numbers start running up.
My worry about going into this was always I didn't want it to just be another generic hip-hop soundtrack. That may be the popular culture of the time, but it's going to date really fast. Once again, it's becoming a cliche to just throw every favorite hip-hop track of the day onto your movie and hope that you get a hit album out of it. I think that's a little cynical business model, but I just think that music should be more integrated into a movie. So we knew we were going to have to deal with composed score. And Marco Beltrami, my composer, who's the perfect guy for this, because he's got a really modern, industrial type of sound.
This score in particular is a wonderful example of a combination of orchestra and hip-hop, and it's conceptually very unusual.
The score that I wanted to do was sort of bring more suspense element to it. Also, to me, the movie it's a little more tongue-in-cheek, and I thought it'd be fun to introduce sort of almost like a little bit of a 70s flair to it. And so I think thematically, I tried to lean a little bit in that direction.
I did come up against a roadblock of my own making. If you're going to put pop culture figures like Ice Cube and Exhibit in a movie, and you're going to set it in Washington, D.C., an East Coast urban enclave, very, very black enclave, you can't avoid dealing with what is the subculture of black music at the moment. Whatever it is, hip-hop, rap, its fusions are at the moment. You can't just suddenly shamelessly stick white rock and roll in there. It's just not going to work properly.
8 to 9, here we go. Everybody at 9.
So we decided to run with a more traditional course of composed music, really to hype up the action.
You know, one of the challenges in doing a movie is that, unlike just a temp score, is that you want it to have a cohesive sound to it. It has to work from beginning to end. Also, there's a continuity with the orchestration and little motives that you hear throughout the suspense stuff and throughout the action scenes. And so as the movie goes on, that you can tell that it's all part of one project. The sound, it's always the competition for music in many scenes, especially in big action movies such as this. As I work on these type of movies, I get more and more aware of having the sound work with the music as opposed to being something that you fight. In this case, the sound guys came, we sort of spotted some areas that were both big music and sound areas and talked about what they would be doing, what I would be doing.
First of all, in the mix, we have to decide where the music carries and where the sound effects need to fall back and vice versa. But by the same token, there's places where you want the music and the sound effects to be playing equally at the same volume. And in that case, what we have to do is we have to cut the effects or design the effects in such a way that they themselves have a rhythm that are complementary to the music. In that scene with the boat, we went out and recorded the boat. It has twin 250 outboard motors, and we went out and actually rented that boat. It's a big, giant inflatable with these twin 250s. We recorded those engines doing all sorts of strange things. Then when we got it back in the studio, we did all sorts of equalization and pitching and things to the engine to make it seem more aggressive and mean, coupled with all sorts of really fast sort of water slicing bow wash sounds. And then when Toby arrives on the bridge, there's a cop car come bearing down on him with the siren. You want to make sure you have a really cool siren with those blips, you know, boop, boop, you know, when a cop pulls you over. I wouldn't know, but, you know, that concept. the launch off the dredge. It has to sound believable, yet it has to sound exciting. So this boat hits this launch, you know, we use a deep metallic hit coupled with the engine just pegged to its highest RPM and then flying through the air, and you hear this huge whoosh as it's flying through the air, and it comes crashing down, skids across this bridge, which incidentally is a metal bridge, which is really cool because it's a metal grate, so you can justify the rubber, you know, and you use like a tire drag to go across metal to create this weird sound of it sliding across and then impacting, and you make that a very clean impact, and then everything's gone. You punch up every little thing that happens. Eventually, one of the cop cars that ignites from the impact, it launches over the side of the bridge and comes crashing down in flames into the water. You've had all this energy and all this crashing and bashing, and suddenly, total silence. He's in the truck.
Mission accomplished.
It's gotten quite complex. The technology has just expanded exponentially. But the great thing is the variations you can do, the type of complex mixes you can achieve. It's really a great thing in many ways.
When you get into the final mix, it's almost like playing an instrument, really. It is really what it becomes. The console becomes my musical instrument. I've got all these flavors, and I can lean on one and push the other or fall back, all in, you know, sort of concert with what the music is doing, with what the dialogue is doing. If it's constant noise, the audience is just going to peel back. But if it's moments of sound that build up to a peak and then fall down, you know, it's creating all those sort of peaks and valleys so that you take the audience on a ride.
What we don't want to have in this is any sort of hokey 3D elements. And we all know what those are when we've seen them before. It still has to be photorealistic, otherwise your suspension of disbelief just becomes less.
The very first meeting I had with Lee and Arnie Schmidt, the producer, was basically hearing Lee talk about his concerns about the fact that we're going to try and do a photoreal looking movie. He never wanted it to look like, well, that's a visual effect, and there's some way of detecting. He wanted helicopters that looked like they had weight. He wanted the camera to look like it was always bound to some sort of a device that really exists. We had really only about 10 weeks to do this whole movie. It was really high-speed production to try and make all the shots basically look real.
A large portion of our beginning work on the show is simply dedicated to collecting reference and studying reference and getting very familiar with what things would really look like. This is an example of a more old-fashioned shot. All that means really is that it's got a classic background plate that was shot by the director on location. That same background plate, which is now passed through our layout group, which is responsible for recreating the camera and then animating the vehicles in that plate. And you can see the bend in the rotor blades. And that came about through studying a lot of actual helicopters taking off and seeing what the blades did. And here you can see the final result. This is with interactive lighting that mimics exactly the lighting conditions on the set that day. We've put the Capitol building in the background and comped it all together with interactive dust and such blowing in the rotor wake. And that's the final result. And I took a look at the concept car, got familiar with the materials, what it looked like in different lighting conditions. We have a team that took a lot of pictures of it, and we modeled the car, matching exactly to the concept car that they had on location. And then we did some look development to get the materials to look just right and to interact appropriately in any given lighting situation. We actually did have several shots at the beginning of the car chase sequence that used the actual car on the set. And we didn't transition to the all-CG car until some point after the car jumped onto the tracks and actually began chasing the train. So we did have some really good reference for what the car should look like as it's traveling at high rates of speed and in different environments. But it was also really challenging because that meant we couldn't get away with a whole lot. It had to look very photoreal. You know, the car was moving very slowly, of course. When it was moved into the back of the train, you can't really crash a car with an actor in it going 200 miles an hour. It's far too dangerous. So we did end up doing a lot of what we call repoing, repositioning of the elements to give it that sense of speed and to give it that momentum when it really crashed into the back.
When you do a shoot, sometimes it doesn't go exactly the way you plan, or it doesn't come across as looking real. So that's the whole idea of special effects, to try to fill in the gaps where filmmaking on sets can't quite achieve what they want. So some of the shots, they can shoot the actors against what we call a green screen, and we can replace the green with any kind of background we want. But certain camera angles don't allow for that kind of photography. So in situations like that, if it's a really dangerous situation and they can't even afford to have a stunt double in there, then sometimes we'll augment that with a digital stunt double. So our job was to not only do the surrounding footage of the character making his way from the Cobra car to the train, but to also somehow make the Cobra car look like it crashes convincingly. So again, we used some three-dimensional computer simulations to achieve that destructive look to the Cobra car. So they construct the three-dimensional car for us, and then we take the car and end up cutting it into pieces, because our job is to make the car crash. We pre-score it, so to speak, which means we cut it in all the pieces we think it should fall apart as the simulation progresses. And then we connect everything all back together again with dynamic constraints that hold the car together long enough for it to tumble and spin, and then we start releasing some of the constraints as if the tape or glue is coming apart, and the car's pieces start tumbling off into different directions.
So we mixed in a lot of real elements that we shot, and the right amount of blending between CG and live action always sort of pushes it more towards realistic looking images. That blend was sort of what we relied upon very heavily. The challenge here was that we had no plates. The only elements that were shot live were ice cubes, green screen elements. The rest was all synthetically, digitally created in the computer. Once he's jumped off, basically if you look at the green screen, it really is a man on the wire. There's wind and his angles are changing a little bit, almost like having a skydiver follow him down while he's jumping from a bridge that's almost a mile high. What we decided to do was take that, put the bridge, and then start moving the camera around and have it rushing down, so it looks like he's descending extremely fast. And what we did was we took the green screen elements and we sometimes changed the perspective a little bit so that it appeared like he was floating, skydiving, while his arms are out, so his descent speed is slower, and then sort of tip him over a little bit and start accelerating the camera along with him, because we tied the camera sort of along with the green screen element that was shot. So basically you have a foreground element of the green screen. If the background is moving really fast relative to that, then it appears like you're falling at almost terminal velocity of 120 miles an hour. And that was something that Lee really loved, because he wasn't sure what to expect. Once we started putting the shots together, he got really excited about the shots and really loved the sequence as it came through.
As I like to tell people, it's not a known path. You kind of confront issues as you get into it, and you hope that you've built all the right things, that you can plug in fast enough, animate them fast enough, do the layout fast enough, and render it fast enough and composite it fast enough to complete it with the schedule that we had.
Because our model shop here at ILM is so good in building very realistic looking miniatures, and so we sort of erred on the side of going with our past experience of other movies and actually building a 6-scale model. To be able to give the DP something to shoot and to know what he needed to shoot and how far the camera would be and what lenses to use, we mocked it up in the computer first. As the train exploded, we wanted the back end to go up and the front to sort of come towards camera and sort of burst apart. Then we went ahead and shot that, and that obviously had some limitations because it was so finely coordinated in terms of the amount of primer cord that actually gives you the explosion inside the miniature. All had to be timed so precisely. Some of this is fairly expensive, so we had really planned on 2 full models so we could get 2 really good takes. After we saw the first one, we thought there was too much fire. So instead of having the model tip over while the explosions were going on, we left it static and just had the explosions go through so that the side walls of the train completely ripped apart. We went back and took our train model and matched it to the take that had more fire in it. We mapped the exploding side, which is the second take, in the computer onto our CG model, and then went back into compositing and took these 2 radically different takes. With the help of a CG model in between, we were able to sort of combine it together.
It's this wonderful world of mix and match where we give the director a lot of freedom of choices how to tell the story and how to show images in the film, because there's a variety of solutions at any given time.
And cut it. Pretty good.
When you have to design 10 minutes of action, it's a huge amount of action. Most action sequences are 1 minute to 2 to 3 minutes long. So this, we sat down and we did it in the same way we've always done it. You write it first, and then you storyboard it. And then and I sat down with my storyboard artist. And so we would just we would edit as we go, and we'd have a look at things. We would lay out hundreds and hundreds of panels about what we needed to do, where and how and what. And from that, we went to what is the next stage of all these movies, what's known as the pre-visualization stage. And it's basically a computer-modeled, it's a rendering, if you will, much akin to video gaming. The software out there now is so good that the previs guys can render in a very short space of time some extraordinarily good-looking graphics. And once we start rendering the action, it gives us an idea of how the thing's going to cut. So I get my editors, my film editors, to cut the high-res pre-visualization sequence. And we then cut that and we put soundtracks on it, and we cut it as if we were cutting the movie. You then have to take that pre-visualization to an effects house. Then, of course, they built the bullet train. The train doesn't exist at all in this movie. Of course, we put 3 choppers in the sky. They don't exist either. It's all digital, apart from some little pieces of stage help to put Ice Cube into for an environment. The car racing along tracks at 200 miles an hour, catching up with a train, and everything is constructed in a 3D environment. You have to do it this way. You can't afford to make this stuff up on the day, and you can't afford to not know what your shots are before you start.
Deal with these guys, we're gonna need some serious gear.
Subtle.
We were looking for next generation military gear in general from the movie.
This movie, much more so than the first film, is pretty rooted in reality when it comes to the gadgetry and the weaponry in the film, and one of the things that was incredibly important to Lee was to stay as true to reality as possible.
In our movie, a lot of the gadgets and a lot of things are quite innovative and quite new.
The audience of the movie is young male that is all into the, computer games, video games. So on one level you have to be somewhat realistic, but on the other level you have to satisfy their visual expectations.
There aren't many things you can really invent that probably haven't been thought of. They might not have been developed yet, but they're in people's heads.
At one point, one of our technical advisors, a guy named Dave Kennedy, got us a tour back east of Quantico and the Pentagon, and we got a sense of what's really going on. To some degree, they're only going to show us things that are not too high-tech or too secret, but in the course of that, we decided that, we ought to try and imagine what's on the drawing boards for the military right now, because an outfit like the NSA probably have first dibs on the highest tech equipment possible.
I would say that almost all the technology on this film is plausible, and almost all of it begins with a base of reality.
Can you make that into a personal weapon? Give me an hour.
Given what Dave Kennedy showed us in and around the Pentagon, in and around the Air Force bases he took us to, in and around Quantico, we are actually a step behind the reality of what the Army is up to right now, technologically speaking. We just saw some insane things, some of which made its way into the movie, most of which is still in some classified file somewhere, hopefully.
Sometimes certain capabilities are scary because they are right around the corner.
Geothermal microcam, aquacade uplinks, 480 gigs. Sir, this thing is 10 generations beyond the NSA.
We had an idea for a little sort of micro-flying insect photographing. It eventually turned into the Flyboy, the little sort of spinning viewer that runs around the XXX Center. But halfway through developing that, the design department came in with a modern weapons thing, and it had a little thing like that, a little flying helicopter with a camera on it.
One of the first gadgets you see in the movie is a thing called a Flyboy, and it's in the control of these commandos that break into NSA headquarters to take out Gibbons and his team. When we were in Quantico, the Marines showed us some remote-controlled equipment that they had that had cameras on it, could have grenades on it, could have all kinds of various armaments on it. It's the leading edge of a lot of equipment that the military is developing.
Now, what our art department has done is taken those and embellished them and make them a little more exciting.
That's where we can do, is take the technology and make it to a point where it looks like it works, but you probably couldn't make it yet.
One of the things that Lee wanted to do, something that is sort of a future of commandos, kind of express that they are sort of a future of the special forces. We did really extensive research when we started working on that. We looked at what they're currently doing, what are they going to be doing in the future. I even looked at, a lot of video games to see visual expectation of the audience. Looked at a whole bunch of special masks from different fields. We wanted them in order to look scary to be dark, but then the camera doesn't see if it's black, so we were a lot of them playing with different textures and shades of gray and stuff like that, so that you don't get just black silhouettes on the screen.
An aircraft carrier is one of the most fantastic machines that's ever been built.
With the aircraft carrier sequence, your initial feeling is that you're looking for the disused aircraft carrier that you can do everything you want to do on it. We knew that we didn't really have enough aircraft of the type that we wanted on the deck in the night scene. We're in the world of digital technology, and people will think we automatically jump to ILM to produce those things, but going back to in-camera effects is just as valuable sometimes, and more cost-effective and more flexible on the shoot days. Arnie Schmidt's always very happy when we can do things like that, because in the end it's making the best use of every cent you have. You know, it's not wasting money in different places, it's getting it on camera.
Well, I will tell you, we've launched cars off the front end of carriers before. I've seen it happen at sea. So, is it improbable? Yes. Is it impossible? Probably not. And I think that's what audiences are worried about. You know, I watch movies with folks and I see technical errors and I complain about them and they say, Dave, would you shut up? It's a movie. We love that scene. And in this case, the idea of that powerful catapult which can launch 70,000-pound aircraft from 0 to 200 miles an hour in less than 2 seconds, certainly it's plausible that it could do that with a vehicle.
When it came to this tank chase on the aircraft carrier, Lee wanted to come up with something new and different as far as the tank.
We wanted to build a kind of a tank of the future.
So they dreamt up this M5 tank.
The tank idea, we always knew we wanted something rather special, but we wanted it to be believable. We wanted it to be the next technology. As we developed it as visuals to show to Lee and to Arnie, I think they started to, believe that it could be quite an interesting thing. And when people saw the finished article, I don't think they even questioned that it wasn't real. Our initial thoughts were that we would build on top of an existing tank chassis. But when John Fraser got involved and we went through all the ramifications of what that would be, and John said we should just build the whole thing.
We'll make you a tank. You can take it anywhere you want in the U.S., over the roads, no permits, nothing, and you can take it on the aircraft carrier. So with that, we started and found out, like everything else, it was a bigger project, making a tank that actually works. We literally bought a used diesel truck, cut it off from the radiator and to the rear end, shortened it about 10 feet, put it on the ground, and started welding metal around it. And this is what we have. And then Lee, our director, wanted to add another element. He said, can you put another turret on the top of it that kind of like, it's like tracking things.
We thought that looked pretty cool, and it's got a very futuristic looking design, and the two turrets rotate against each other. There's a mini turret on top and then a large one for firing the cannon they have in it.
Welcome to the first tank jacking in history.
They don't know how to operate it. They can steal it, but they can't drive it. So we thought, well, let's just put some cars in the way and let's just let them have fun with it. Now, when you see it rolling over cars and stuff, we take the motors out of the cars, we weaken the frame. The tires are actually already blown out, and we just set them on little jacks, and then when the tank goes over it, we blow those jacks out. So there's a little bit of movie magic in that. When that tank goes over it, we help it a little.
You have to look at the finished work that he did, and it was brilliant and looked just completely real. So it was a great collaboration between, I think, what we do in the design department and the special effects do in their world. It's another thing that the audience hopefully will, wow, what's that?
When they first came out with XXX, it was kind of the younger, hipper, cooler Bond, and we keeping with that tradition. You know what I'm saying?
He's this kind of guy who's capable of breaking things down and smashing things and shooting things up.
Blows up my car, he blows up my boats. Who the hell is this guy?
You've got a guy who's got obviously a tremendous history with music and a lot of other things, and he just has an attitude.
How long has it been? Not long enough. By me playing a different agent and not trying to play the guy that Vin was sets us apart.
You're gonna have to blend.
I don't blend. A guy like me doing an action movie, that opens it up. The things I can't do for my country. You're the new XXX. Sound like a porno star.
In the script, it says we need somebody more dangerous, more wild, with more attitude.
The Darius I remember always liked to throw the first punch.
And I think that's been a part of Cube's persona from back in the NWA days.
If you run, you look guilty. Brother, I was born looking guilty.
When we started really thinking about who could play that part, the list is very small. There aren't that many manly men in Hollywood, and Cube seemed to be the perfect fit.
Oh, that's Big Daddy Stone to you.
Cube is such a different X than Vin.
This is a different character. It gave me the opportunity to make Cube into something else, action hero, which we hadn't seen him do.
I'm gonna really miss you boys. What?
I think he really understands that his attitude is the thing that is really very charismatic,
We need to go to work now. I need to get more fries in another shape.
He's got a defiance that we kind of all wish we had.
You work for us now, so you're gonna do
what I want, when I want.
We had to do our love scene, and
What's in it for me?
we had to get really close, and it almost felt like a stare down, and he won, and I'm a little upset about that, but what can you do?
I can do nasty.
I know you can.
I watched him develop, and it's really nice to finally actually work with him.
I've been on the inside a long time, and I need what every man needs when he's coming off a lockdown. You know what I'm saying?
He has a lot of good ideas. He brings a specific kind of energy to the scenes we're in together, and it works very well for me.
You happy? I'm good.
Ice Cube did some of my favorite music coming up. I was a fan before I actually knew the man. And man, it was actually crazy working with him because he gave me pointers, you know, as we were working.
Told you there'd be tanks waiting.
And I told you, if it got wheels, we can jack it.
My personal preference is for the outlaw, the rebel, the cop killer rapper.
God bless America.
I like that guy, but Cube is smart enough to see that you can get stuck in a rut just being that guy.
Call me. I feel like the music is just as important as the acting, but I've been able to do things that's not so traditional or not, you know, that doesn't run parallel with my music.
I like that. Who said it? Jefferson, Patton,
Tupac. This is the funnest movie I've been a part of as far as on the physical.
He's actually quite a gifted athlete, very physical. Did all of his own fights, all of his own stunts.
I got in the best shape I've been in since I played football in high school.
Cube just got in there and did it.
Stay put, I'll handle this. Of course, I couldn't turn into a Navy SEAL in 5 months, but I damn sure got close. I felt like I was badass. I'll take lead, you lay down cover.
Whoa, what do you mean you'll take lead?
I'm XXX. It was everything you would hope to be able to do without getting shot at.
He never was the cop killer. All he was the irreverent rapper who was raging against the machine, basically, and still does.
I'm not feeling too patriotic these days.
He has somewhat of a subversive reputation, XXX character's not supposed to be like me, the goody two-shoes, the government official. I think it works great that, he's kind of your anti-hero.
You sure know how to pick him, sir.
Ice Cube has just put a great example out there of what you can achieve when you apply yourself, and that you don't have to be pigeonholed into one aspect of the entertainment business. I think that he's an entrepreneur. I don't think he's a rapper or an actor. I think Ice Cube is a franchise, walking.
I wanted to become Darius Stone and just try to live up to what the script says Darius Stone should be. We're gonna do it big, baby.